it should go through, or whether you think there should be changes. I think we should start soon because it's 7 o'clock.
We have a quorum, we do.
We have a quorum.
All right.
Okay, do I need to go over there then?
Mr. Cruz, if you'd like to move down, you can.
I'll have an extra set. So, I can make sure you know wait. Well, I'll move down too. Oh, you can move down. How about you? Are you stuck there? I know I smell, but please.
All right, I guess this will call to order the February 24th meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board. And can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Hasse, Mr. Seaman,
Here.
Ms. McCumber. Here. Mr. Vesey, Mr. Stavropoulos.
Here.
Ms. Vigil,
Here.
Mr. Kuskudis,
Present. Here.
Mr. Morgan.
All right, we have a quorum. On to item 2, that's the approval of the minutes of the December 16th meeting.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the December 16th minutes.
I'll second that motion.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Kuskudis,
Yes.
Ms. Vigil,
Yes.
Mr. Stavropoulos.
Yes.
Ms. McCumber,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman.
Yes. All right, that brings us to the quasi-judicial announcement and swearing of speakers.
This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Planning and Zoning Board acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. Are there any members of the board wishing to disclose any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest this evening? Seeing none, anyone wishing to speak this evening, if you could please stand and raise your right hand to be sworn in. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. So sworn.
All right, that brings us to item number 4, applications 19109 and 19110. That is a conditional use approval and site plan approval. Does the staff have a report for us?
Yes, good evening. This is a conditional use and site plan approval for a proposed permanent parking lot on the north side of Hill Street. It's located behind an existing single-family residence on Hope Street on existing vacant property. This was proposed as a permanent surface parking lot on the property, and the lot includes a total of 9 spaces, including 1 handicapped accessible space. The lot access would be taken entirely from Hill Street. There is no access proposed from the alley, and this is located in the T5C Transect District, which is the Dodecanese Avenue, Main Street. And this district allows surface parking lots subject to a conditional use approval. With respect to your standards for review, the proposed design complies with the T5C district and the Land Development Code. And Number 2, this is located within the Sponge Docks Character District of the Special Area Plan, and this is an area that encourages activity. It's tourist-oriented, mostly commercial uses. There are also multiple private parking lots in this area to accommodate tourists. Number 3, this project is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. Number 4, this project is not within a historic district, and it's not in an environmentally sensitive area. With respect to number 5, this use should not adversely affect adjoining property values, should support local businesses and area businesses and the tourist-oriented activity at the docks by providing additional parking that is safe and convenient for the public. With respect to number 6, this project already has some city water and sewer and facilities serving or installed in the area, so this will not require extension of public facilities. And again, the use carries out the purpose of the district and will not adversely affect growth patterns in the city. With respect to your site plan review, I'll just touch on a couple things. Again, there is no impact on levels of service for water, sewer, solid waste, or transportation, as this is a surface parking lot. So concurrency management standards are also met. The TRC the city's technical review committee did review this project on December 5th, 2019, and recommended it be forwarded to this board for review. There were notices sent to owners within 500 feet of the property. Staff received one written response to the notices. That is in your packet, and the response is in your packet, and we've addressed the concern in the conditions. Staff recommends approval of applications 19-109, 19-110, and Resolution 2020-05, requesting a conditional use and associated site plan to allow for establishment of a surface parking lot on 0.15 acres of land located on the north side of Hill Street in the T5C Transect District with the following conditions. An engineer's certification of the existing retaining wall on the north side of the property shall be submitted attesting to the wall's structural integrity to support the existing fill and proposed permanent parking lot use. I will comment that this was a concern of, I guess, one of the adjacent property owners. The wall is mostly not on this property. It's mostly on the residential property to the east. There's only a couple of feet of the wall on this property. If you have any questions about its structural integrity, the engineer is here and can respond to those. Staff is not concerned that this will be an issue. Condition number 2, the applicant shall supply an updated letter of exemption from the Southwest Florida Water Management District. I've actually received that letter as of Friday, so I do have that, and that's available. Striping shall be installed across the entrance-exit driveway to mark crosswalk access connecting the existing sidewalks, and that shall be shown on the final site set of plans. And the developer is responsible for acquiring all jurisdictional permits and meeting the land development code, and the construction plan shall be consistent with the approved site plan. Are there any questions?
I have a few. Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you this. Is there a requirement to have some type of parking grid, or what I mean by that, or designated spaces? This is, I see that this will be a parking on grass, but it's just the free-flow parking, or is there going to be a grid system that people can park?
There is a requirement to to design the parking lot according to our standards, which includes curb stops and the appropriate delineation of each space.
So the curb stops would basically act as part of the delineation of where cars can park?
Sure.
Okay. Has there, and again, I see people parking on grass, it's not uncommon. You know, currently, is it grass or is it dirt right now? Or do you know?
It's mainly grass.
Okay.
If you look at the second page of your site plan, and I didn't really call this out much in the staff report, but the applicant is proposing a geotextile surface on which the parking will occur.
Is there, you know, when we have the heavy rains and stuff like that, cars parking on grass, you know, my concern, not that I have an issue with this because I don't, but like there's a rut system, you know, when we're ruts with all the parking, erosion, et cetera. Is that something that the city polices, or is that something that the property owner would have to keep track of?
Yes, in fact, this did come back to TRC. The original proposal was to park on grass
Okay.
with no solid surface to prevent erosion, and staff required some surface. There was mulch proposed and different things.
That would flow away.
We required a surface that would retain that soil there and support vehicles, and the applicants proposed a geotextile. The applicant's engineer is here, and he can explain a little more about how that works if you're interested.
No,
It's a good system, allows per...
That's fine, I take your word for it. So
Yeah.
I have, those are just my questions, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Does the applicant have anything they'd like to say?
Hi, I'm Brett Krasman. I'm the engineer. What we're actually proposing is called a GeoWeb system. It's a plastic system. It just kind of stretches out. We put it down, we fill it back with dirt, put grass on top of it. There'll be no rutting. It can hold a fire truck. It's very solid, very stable. And as far as the wall, this wall is 3 foot onto my client's property. The top of the wall is 6.9, the bottom of the wall is 6.21. That's 0.7 feet, which is that much. So to put it in real terms, the wall is this high. There's 3 feet from the wall to the property line. We could get rid of the wall and feather it out to the property line easily enough. So the wall issue, I just want to make sure you understand that's not really an issue at all. And other than that, any questions for me?
Yeah, on that, the webbing system, I think, I know what you're talking about. It's probably, what, about 2 inches thick?
It's between 4 and 6, depending on which
Oh.
one we use.
Okay.
There's a GeoBlock system that is 2 inches. It's very stable. It's not as pervious as this system. This is 98% pervious, so water can percolate through. But it's, because it's so thick and rigid, it's still,
So is it, when you set it down, is it backfilled with dirt?
we backfill with dirt and put grass over top. And yeah, it's rated for the H20 loadings and for fire trucks.
Yeah.
It's a very stable system.
Right.
It'll hold the shape of the ground no matter what.
Right.
We won't have rutting, and
Exactly.
we met all the staff's requirements with that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any members of the public here that would like to comment? And please,
So, just so you know, we're going to need to keep a copy of that for the record with the secretary, if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
Okay.
keep that. Okay.
please
my
state
name-
your name and address.
Yes, my name is Michael A. Hulis. I live at 1504 Riverside Drive. I'm one of the owners of the property located to the north of the subject applicant's property. The only thing that separates me from being contiguous is the city has a 10-foot alley. Okay? Now, I have no objection to him putting a parking lot in there, and if he wants to do it without asphalting it, I don't care if he does asphalt it. I'm only here because his property slopes and sheets to his north. The hill comes down from south to north, and the lowest part is his northwest corner. If you look at the picture number 3, you'll see that there's a retaining wall. Now, as far as the looks of it, I'm not even complaining about that. It's just that that retaining wall has been removed the last 40 or 50 feet. And that's the 40 or 50 feet that is the northern border of this applicant. And it's not the water that comes down, it's the dirt that comes down on a daily basis. I've asked, by the way, he's my cousin, so we're related. We're first cousins, the applicant and I. I'm just asking, actually, he should use the alley. The only thing is, in order to do this, you have to jump the remaining retaining wall, and that's all not going to be paved, so it'll be just continuously dirt comes down, and we clean this on a daily basis. Not so much myself because I'm getting too old, but my brother has the parking lot, and he's here. He could answer any questions. It's the dirt that falls over, and when you say that this is going to be entrance and exit is going to be from Hill Street, which is from the south, that's nice. It could be from the alley as well, if this retaining wall was retaining the dirt. It's not retaining the dirt, and it's also not good for the customers, but that's, if the customers want to jump the foundation of that retaining wall is still there on the last 50 feet. It runs the whole length. I'd like for him to put that back up so that whether it's water or dirt, it doesn't end up in the alley and then end up in my property. And since we're doing a parking lot at this time, as far as the safety and the aesthetics, you judge for yourself. You got the pictures right in front of you. I don't want to tell a man what to do with his property, but it doesn't look too safe or aesthetically because it isn't going to be long. Y'all have meetings here about signs outside and the aesthetics and everything, and I don't know which way y'all going. But my issue is the dirt, and it's not safe. And I wish he'd pave it, and we would eliminate this problem and build a nice retaining wall and wrap it. But it's been going on for the last 3 or 4 years now that it's been heavily parked on. That retaining wall was put up 60 years ago. When that house was built, dirt was brought to the property, and they put a retaining wall in, and it was meant just to hold the dirt back. Now that you're parking heavy cars, and they're parked pretty close to that retaining wall, you can notice in the pictures. And so that's the major complaint. And my brother can only speak about moving, and the dirt happens every other day. It happens every day, even if it doesn't rain sometime, because nothing's holding it from falling down. This is the time to speak, and we spoke.
I'd like a question of the engineer. With the system that you're looking at putting in, how does that affect what Mr. Hulis's concern is?
You're going to have to get on the microphone so it can be recorded for the record. Thank you.
We're putting a curb around the south and west side of the parking area. So that'll be 6 inches high, so anything running down will be caught by that curb. Any water would percolate in before it sheet flowed off the property. But the property is going downhill, and the law states that you can't stop water that goes there in the pre-condition from the post-condition, so the water is supposed to go there. But yeah, the curb around the parking will collect anything that's coming down. There's, what do we have? We have about 4 feet, 5 feet to the wall, from the curb to the wall. So that's the only spot that, you know, if water hit that, it would just run off like it does now, but everything else would be caught by the curb.
That answers my question.
Are any other comments from the public?
I'm not talking about water that hits there. The dirt after this curb is still running, is still going every day into the alley and from the alley to our property. And if that retaining wall was still there, it wouldn't have happened. It got taken down or fell down because of its condition. That's the, and I think this is a good time, if you just put that retaining wall back up for those last 50, 60 feet, and I don't care if it looks bad, it's better than nothing. I don't know why it was taken down. That's all.
All right, if there's no further comments from the public, do I hear a motion?
I will make a motion to go ahead and approve the applicant's petition.
I'll second that.
All right, is there any discussion amongst the board?
I believe the engineer's responses are appropriate with regard to Mr. Hulis's concern. You know, I know it's hard to stop dirt when it rains, and you know, the hope is that with the system that is put in, from my understanding, there will be some type of system with dirt on top. So it will be less dirt because you have to be able to have vehicles on top of that and not to create a rutting system or ruts. So my belief is that, Mr. Hulis, and I understand your concern, is that that problem may not be as onerous as it has been.
Well, it does. If it's built according to the plans, it does have a curb at the end, so somebody would at least have to jump the curb to go to the alley.
So,
Okay. If there's no discussion amongst the board, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Kouskoudis,
yes.
Ms. Vigil,
Yes.
Mr. Stavropoulos,
Yes.
Ms. McCumber,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman.
Yes. That brings us to application 19-167, conditional use and site plan approval to operate a seasonal short-term residential rental at 609 Hope Street in the T4A Transect District.
Yes, and this is a conditional use approval request for, again, a seasonal short-term rental. This is in the city's special area plan, again, in the T4A district. And that district, like several of the districts in special area, allows seasonal short-term rentals. This is located at 609 Hope Street, just near the one we just looked at. It's an existing single-family residence. It's right across the street there from the Hellas parking lot on Hope Street. With respect to your standards for review, again, this is a single-family residence. It does include sufficient access and parking for a single-family residence, which is what is required here. The Technical Review Committee did review this project at their December 19th, 2019 meeting, and it complies with the Land Development Code. Item 2, this is, again, in the Sponge Docks Character District of the City Special Area Plan. So that's an area of tourist activity, mixed uses, mostly commercial. There's a single-family residence just to the north of this one. There's basically what has been an institutional building just to the south. So there's a mix there of uses. The project is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. It's not located in a historic district or on an environmentally sensitive site. It will continue to be subject to all city codes and ordinances, so solid waste, noise, those types of potential impacts from a short-term rental will be addressed, continue to be addressed through existing city ordinances. And again, this is an activity area, so it will fit the character of the neighborhood. This residence is already served by public facilities, so there's no new impact on public facilities. And this project will promote the efficient and orderly development of that Sponge Docks Character District and won't adversely affect the city's growth patterns. This was properly noticed and there were no responses received to the notices. Staff is recommending approval of this project with the following conditions. The property shall remain a single-family residence rented as a single living unit. Number 2, the building shall be maintained with the following: 1 smoke detector in each sleeping area, 1 smoke detector in the common hall between sleeping areas, smoke detectors of the 10-year lithium battery style, and a fire extinguisher having annual inspections. And condition number 3 would be that the applicant obtain a City of Tarpon Springs business tax receipt for this use. Are there any questions?
If there's no questions of the staff, would the applicant like to comment?
I did receive an email from the applicant today stating that he would probably not attend, so I wasn't sure. But.
Well, are there any comments from the public then? All right. Seeing no public comments, can I get a motion?
I would like to just note for the motion, because the conditions were read into the record, that if there's a motion made in the affirmative, that you just consider the conditions be part of that motion.
I'll make a motion incorporating the conditions.
Is that a motion for approval?
It's a motion of approval.
I'll second that.
Can we have a roll call?
Mr. Kouskoudis?
Yes.
Ms. Vihil?
Yes.
Mr. Stravopoulos?
Yes.
Ms. McCumber?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes. All right, motion carries. That brings us to application 18-38. That's a Land Development Code Amendment, Ordinance 2020-06, amendments to Article 11, sign regulations. I assume the staff has a report.
Yes, Louis Cerna presenting staff comments this evening. The primary purpose of this draft ordinance is to address needed changes in response to a 2015 decision of the U.S. Supreme Court. And the decision primarily affected the regulation of sign content and how communities can regulate signs based on content. So a majority of the changes in this ordinance, there's a lot of changes, but a majority of them are addressing that one issue of sign content in regard to that 2015 decision. We've attached the draft ordinance. I didn't explain in the report, but the ordinance has both red text and blue text, and the red text are initial changes that were made to the ordinance, primarily in response to that Supreme Court decision. The blue text came later as a result of 2 workshops held by the commission on June 18th and September 30th of last year. So that's what the colors mean. As I indicated, a lot of it is in regard to sign content and how that's regulated and defined. Every time you open up sign regulations, there are always additional issues that come up, and we've attempted to summarize them in 6 other points in the staff report. I did want to point out, and we had this discussion with the commission at the workshops, that approving this or denying it, whichever direction they want to go in, does not mean, if they approve this ordinance, it does not mean that the community can't come back at a later date and address signs. We understand there's always a lot of issues and a lot of discussion and a lot of updating, frankly, that needs to be window and door signs. This appears on page 42 of the ordinance, but basically it's a new regulation that allows the regulation of window and door signs. There was not a regulation previously, and now there is, and it basically allows these signs based on a percentage of your total window or door sign area. So again, this is something that primarily was driven by staff, that is something that is a frequent request, and now we can address it in the ordinance. The third item there, the third point, is pole banners. This is allowing signs up to 12 square feet. This appears on page 42. Allows signage placed on light poles that are not. These are not light poles located within the rights of way, but these are within parking lots. And thinking of Advent Health and that as an example of the pole signs that they currently have. But again, this is something not related to content, but is something that was recognized as a deficiency in the ordinance that we've added. Item number 4, bus bench signs. This appears on pages 43 and page 49. This was a recommendation of the commissioners at the workshops. Basically, section 181.03, that should be subsection D. But basically, it would prohibit these sorts of the bus bench signs, basically. And then section 185.03 establishes a time for the removal, which is January 1st of 2026. So this is a major change that's included in the ordinance, prohibiting these signs and establishing a time frame for their removal. Item 5, pole and monument signs, pages 56 and 57 of the ordinance. Basically, the discussion of the commission was to prohibit pole signs, but we, through the discussions, came up with a system to incentivize monument signs by allowing them to be taller, monument signs, that is, to be taller and have greater sign area. So a different way of regulating those sorts of signs. Item 6 deals with wall sign. This was, the change there is a recommendation from staff based on a common problem that occurs with these wall signs. Currently, the current code limits you to 1 single wall sign. The change strikes the word one, so it basically allows businesses to have more than 1 wall sign, but the sign area stays the same. So basically, it's not going to have a tremendous impact because it's not affecting area, but allows flexibility to allow multiple wall signs. And this is particularly an issue when you have multiple buildings with a single business. And then finally, item number 7, the A-frame sandwich board signs. This was a recommendation of the commission to require some standards with those, and namely, and this is on page 64, to require that these signs be composed of chalkboard-type material capable of being written on with chalk. We did receive some public comments, which were distributed as a part of what you have this evening. Just in summary, it seems like the comments there were particularly concerning the prohibition of bus bench signs and the requirement of that the A-frame signs be the chalkboard material. Again, staff is recommending approval of ordinance 2020-06 based on the needed updates to the ordinance. And with that, we'd be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Obviously, I have questions. When you say the changes to the sign ordinance were as a result of a Supreme Court ruling?
Yes.
Okay, so so all these changes, there are significant changes in here. These are all related to the Supreme Court. Or you decided we were going to clean up the sign ordinance since we're got to do this anyways?
Yeah, the primary purpose, probably most of what you see that is in red, is to address that important issue.
Okay.
Now, the other items that I ticked off, the other 6 items, there were some other changes, and that's why we called them out. Again, when you open up the sign ordinance, there were some other needed changes. So it's a mixture of both, but primarily it is because of that Supreme Court decision.
I want to, first of all, I want to thank you and staff, because this is pretty voluminous to have gone through in detail. But when you say that the staff helped promulgate these changes, okay, and they were presented to the city commission during a couple workshops, do you know if Chamber of Commerce was invited to participate in assisting, because these affect businesses, okay, or the Downtown Merchants Association, were they invited to be part of the drafting of some of this stuff?
Yeah, let me back up before that. As far as the content issue goes, that language was the result of the attorney's office, so they should really get the credit for a lot of that hard work.
Okay.
And then there were other changes that came up as a result of the workshops. The workshops were publicly noticed, and there was, at least for the final workshop, noticing sent to the chamber folks. So, again, whether or not it's enough, I guess that could be argued, but again, we want to make sure the content issue at least gets addressed.
I understand that. What I find problematic is there's a lot of changes here that have some direct impact on businesses and how they operate and how they can advertise.
Absolutely.
Okay. And as such, I think this is it's important that we embrace our business community when looking at these drafts, okay? And where you say that they showed up at the last workshop, but I don't know if that's enough, number one. I see some of the changes where when you talk about an abandoned structure, you reduced it from 180 days to 60 days. I'm a business owner. I own several properties here in Tarpon Springs. If I have an abandoned tenant, if a tenant vacates and I have a hard time, trying to get a tenant in there, and it takes me more than 60 days, now do I have to go back with the signage? Then I'm not grandfathered in, obviously, so now I have to conform to whatever the new code is. If there are setback requirements in putting a monument sign, now I'm out of sync because it's been sitting vacant or abandoned for 60 days. Now that could affect my ability to continue to use a sign that I had there before because it's 60 days. I'm just, I'm going through some of my questions here.
In regard to signs that would
I was going to ask
become,
you, is that a Supreme Court decision that you got to give 60 days instead of 180?
no, I don't think that was one related to content, but in regard to signs that would become non-conforming as a part of this, they would be allowed to remain as legal non-conforming and could stay until they were destroyed. So it's not, except when it comes to the bus bench signs,
Okay.
nobody's going to be required to remove any non-conforming signs.
Well, I'm just reading from the top, where sign or sign structure is considered abandoned or discontinue when the owner fails to operate or maintain a sign for a period of at least 60 days. Does it say specifically, doesn't necessarily reference a specific type of sign?
Yeah, and that's specifically in regard to a sign that's been abandoned. So it's not a sign that becomes non-conforming, but that is specifically in regard to that.
Non-use is deemed abandoned. Non-use is deemed abandoned from what I read, correct?
Yeah, that's my understanding, but it's different than, that's something that does not conform to the sign.
So if I have a sign, and I don't have a tenant there, so the building is sitting empty, and it's not being used for 60 days, according to the definition here, it's abandoned. And if it's abandoned, then, and if it was non-conforming, now I'm in trouble if I find a tenant and want to use the same sign.
Yeah, I'm looking at the definition now.
Yeah, I read it as if it's a operate or maintain a sign. So if you've got the property, it's been more than 60 days and the sign is like all falling over and falling down.
No, that's not what it says.
Then
It
it
said,
would be,
if I have a monopole sign,
right?
tenant's gone, I still have a monopole sign, obviously there's nobody in there. Okay, so the sign's sitting empty. The sign sits empty, the way I read this, for 60 days, then I have to comply with the new, now it's gotta be, conforming.
Well, and a point of clarification, not necessarily that the business is empty, but that it is not properly licensed, which I understand could be one and the same,
Well,
but
but
it may not. And the
But
language
should
is,
it be clearer in there then?
no, it doesn't need to be. It says the following conditions shall be considered as the failure to operate or maintain a sign. A sign displaying advertising for a product or service which is no longer available, or displaying advertising for a business which is no longer licensed, or
Okay.
a sign which is blank. This definition includes signs on which advertise business that is no longer licensed,
Okay.
no longer has a certificate of occupancy. So, I mean, it's pretty clear as to what is
Does it say
considered.
and a certificate of occupancy or?
It says or.
Okay, so then what you're saying then, just, so you represent us, okay?
No,
What-
in my capacity sitting at this board, I'm just here to advise the Planning and Zoning Board.
Okay.
I am not sitting in my capacity as the role of city attorney. I know that's different, but
Okay.
it is a
Well, I
a
guess
different-
you're advising us.
I'm advised, and I can only advise you, this is legislative, so.
You're
Go ahead,
advising.
ask your question.
Well, you're advising us what the meaning is. That's what you're,
Correct,
okay.
right.
So you're telling us that if I have a monopole sign and the business is gone for 60 days or greater, okay, if I want to use that monopole sign, that it's still, even though it's not conforming now, or was non-conforming, then I should be still being able to use that sign if it's
Well,
non-conforming.
it doesn't, so you're talking about two different things. You're talking about an abandoned or discontinued sign or sign structure, and you're talking about a non-conforming sign.
Well, if I have a sign that's not conforming, but it's grandfathered in,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if it's abandoned for 60 days, okay, it's not conforming. If it's not conforming, and I want to...
You're saying it started out as being non-conforming?
Yeah, start out as being non-conforming, okay? Tenant leaves, it sits empty for 60 days, all right? Because the time has lapsed 60 days, it's deemed non-conforming, so now I get a tenant in on day number 70, and they want to put up a sign, I'm going to be denied because the sign is deemed non-conforming, and now I have to comply with the new sign ordinance.
Well, eventually, your non-conforming signs will have to comply with the sign ordinance regardless.
But
And the non-conforming signs, may be continued in operation provided that
they're not abandoned.
should not be changed or replaced with another non-conforming sign.
Well, when we're talking about signage, you're talking about a faceplate.
Well, and I'm just reading to you what.
I understand that.
What it says.
My problem is there's a lack of clarity. My other problem is, I think it would have been appropriate to at least have invited the chamber and some of the business community to participate in some of the drafting of this, because it does impact them. I'm looking at some of the other information, that if there's an application that sits unaddressed for more than 20 days, it's deemed denied. Okay? You know, so if somebody submits an application and the city doesn't respond to it timely, then it's deemed denied. There's other things I can go here and go through. I don't want to keep us here all night, but
Well, this is your opportunity to advise the Board of Commissioners, to get your thoughts on the record and to advise the Board of Commissioners whether this board as a
Okay.
whole recommends to approve this ordinance, to deny the approval of this ordinance, or to recommend approval with conditions or changes.
mural signs, okay? If you take that wine distillery that just opened up, I mean, the whiskey distillery, okay, they have the mural on the outside, you know, is that deemed a sign or is that deemed artwork?
It's addressed, murals are addressed in the artwork section, and that would not be prohibited. We did want to make sure that that was clear,
Okay.
that we were not prohibiting any of the
But it advertises-
existing or proposed murals that
When
are
I read
going
it
on.
here, if it advertises its business, it's prohibitive,
Well,
unless I read something
Says,
differently.
but does not
yeah,
convey the name of
we
the-
looked at the definition of artwork.
Okay.
It says it right here. Page 18, says artwork means 2 or 3-dimensional representation of a creative idea that's expressed in an art form, but does not convey the name of the business or commercial message.
Okay, so if I've got a whiskey distillery and I have a building painted with all the distillery equipment in there, I mean, you know, Jimmy, you know, my concern is that's subjective. Okay, that's subjective. Somebody could say, no, that's artwork, or somebody could say, no, that's signage.
Well, we were very careful to make sure that it was only the name of the business. So, yeah, we had the same concern and definitely don't want to prohibit, you know, distillery putting distillery-related artwork, or even, you know, a pizza place for that matter, displaying, you know, pizza-related artwork, if there is such a thing. But we really wanted to distinguish the wording is what makes it a sign. And you know, I think it's important that we have that definition of artwork to actually not have the subjectivity in there. But yeah, like I said, as far as the chamber members, staff did make an effort to get people here, and I think we were a little disappointed that we didn't have the turnout that we would have liked. But, you know, we definitely, if you have individual concerns, we will pass those along to the commission so they can make decisions based on certain sections of the ordinance.
Make no mistake, I applaud you, the efforts that were put in here. This is very tedious, and I'm not trying to come down on you, but when I look at certain things I think are troublesome. If you look on page 35, where it talks about submission of an application, you know, and it talks about if a decision, and y'all had crossed out 45 days, if a decision was not made as to a permit, it's deemed denied. Okay, so if somebody, for whatever reason, doesn't get a chance to address that permit, it's deemed denied. Now you have the applicant have to go through the appellate process in front of, and you know, I think that's fundamentally unfair. Because you're taking it out of the hands of the applicant, you're putting it in the hands of the city, and if the city doesn't act in a timely manner, the applicant gets penalized.
Yeah, I understand. And if, you know, again, if you want to make these specific comments, we'll pass them along to the commission. And I think the
But you're
issue
asking-
is there. It would not be in the reviewer's interest to not make a decision and then have it denied, because he would not be making, he or she would not be doing their job.
I understand that, but when you're asking us to approve this, you're asking us to approve it in total, okay?
You can approve it with, subject to individual changes, recommendations for individual changes.
A question now, the blue that has a line through it is is verbiage that was put in and then taken out, is that?
Yeah, originally it was 45 days, and then the blue came out of the workshops. So the first version had 45, apparently.
Well, there's on 18, where it talks about the artworks and murals.
What page is that?
18. The section about if displayed as a two-dimensional representation on a flat surface, same shall not exceed 1/4 of the total surface area. So that was something that was considered, and it's got a line striking through it.
Yeah,
So
that
I'm
was
thinking
removed for the
that was-
reason of the size restriction.
Okay.
We did not.
I just wanted to make sure that wasn't something that was still in.
No,
Another thing, and this has nothing to do with the work here, I feel exactly like Mike does, it's a tremendous effort, but, I mean, this is a major revision of a very important ordinance, and the first time I even heard of it was when we got this package. I didn't hear about the meetings. I wasn't noticed of the meetings. I'm a business holder. I'm a business owner in Tarpon Springs and vice chair of this commission, and I wasn't noticed about the meeting. I was noticed about the historic preservation hearings and things that have all gone on recently, but I wasn't noticed about this meeting.
Yeah, I understand, and like I said, I think staff did make an effort to notify, particularly the business community that would be most affected by this. And again, we want to keep in mind the primary purpose of the whole ordinance, and we can always come back and make changes later on.
But making a change later on, after an ordinance is adopted, is sometimes an uphill battle, okay?
Oh, yeah,
And so,
but we just.
the idea for me is, you guys did a lot of work here, okay? And if I'm gonna sign off on something, I wanna sign off on something that I don't wanna have to revisit because there's some flaws. That's just me, and so as much work as y'all has been done, I'm just of the position that this needs to be fine-tuned even greater, taking into consideration an invitation, and if they don't come, then that's their fault, because it affects those people who do business in this community. The Chamber, Downtown Merchants Association, that, you know, I'm a resident of Tarpon. I don't necessarily follow every time there's a workshop or meeting. Do I look on the agenda to see if something affects me or doesn't affect me? Okay, that's my fault. You know, you try to be a good steward for your community. But if somebody reached out to me and said, Mike, they're doing something significant in this community that affects businesses, you need to attend. Then that's going to perk my curiosity and my ears, and I want to attend because it affects me, okay? Again, y'all did one heck of a job going through this, because I wouldn't want to do this for the life of me. But I don't know if I'm ready to say, okay, I approve. I'd like to see this be fine-tuned with the invitation of those who are primarily affected. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do everything a business wants you to do, because there's got to be standards. But there's certain things that I see in here that I think are onerous, going back to if an applicant submits, and I don't want to have to piecemeal, well, we have a problem with this, and this, because I got this over the weekend, okay? And I tried to digest as best I could in a few days what it took y'all a long time to produce, okay? So I don't have the luxury of going line by item. Some of it I have to read, digest, because I don't understand when you talk about measuring signs from the farthest point to the, okay, I have to think that through. So, you know, I'm looking at things that I say, well, that makes sense. I don't know if this makes sense. Again, going back to the applicant, if the applicant makes an application and if it's not determined in 20 days, it's deemed denied. But I find that problematic. because it takes that out of the hands of the applicant, you know? And then they have to appeal it to the city manager. Well, I don't want to have to appeal stuff to the city manager.
You know, I'm in complete agreement, Mike. I'm not prepared to vote for this. I don't really want to vote against it. So, and I think some of the rest of us are in the same situation. I mean,
Hate to be the bearer of bad news, you'll have to do one or the other tonight.
Yeah, and I certainly appreciate the comments as far as the complexity of it. It is very complex, and signs in general are complex. We do have a compliance issue since 2015 that I think the attorney is particularly concerned about. So what we were hoping, if possible, and I understand it may not be possible, but if we could make call out specific concerns that we could bring forward. But I understand if that's not possible.
we'd be here all night.
There's too much for me to, to go in detail.
Sure.
Item by item. I'm sorry. I go back to the example. There was a gentleman in Clearwater who had that fish market. And I think he had a fish market with the fish painted all over the building. And the city basically said he was in violation of the site ordinance. Even though the murals were pretty, they sort of kind of told the story of what he did, and that was deemed inappropriate, even though it was a beautiful mural. I don't want this city to get to that.
In regard to that specific issue, staff shares the concern, and this is specifically written to not prohibit those sorts of things.
I understand that, but to go through this and say, this has reached my comfort zone, I can't do that.
Sure.
No, I think it's, I mean, like Mike said, I was out of town for the weekend. I saw it this morning, the first thing. That's not enough time to digest this many pages of information and render an adequate determination on it. That's not fair to the board for the staff to put us in this position.
I have a question or maybe suggestion. Is it possible to pull some of these out and only have it apply to maybe the historic district? Like the chalkboard sandwich boards might look great in downtown Tarpon Avenue, but if Bahama Bucks is trying to do that on Alt 19, no one's going to see that chalkboard sign. So I feel like there are certain regulations that might fit for the Sponge Dock area and the historic district.
I agree with you, but I just don't feel comfortable piecemealing it.
No, I agree. It's a suggestion that
Yeah.
I would like to bring back to the committee or whoever's doing this as well.
Yes, and you can certainly make those sorts of recommendations.
See, those sandwich signs are great for pedestrian traffic, but null and void for vehicular traffic. It just doesn't work. There's no way you can see that.
So I think they need to take into
Gotta
effect
be
the different parts of Tarpon. So,
Yes.
like, some things might work in some areas, but not in other areas of the
Yes.
city. So I think doing a whole city ordinance is,
Yeah, and
Well,
it can certainly be, and we had those discussions with the commission, whether or not it should be citywide and things like that. So, yeah, it's definitely appropriate to make those recommendations if,
I would recommend that.
okay.
So it says on here that this is a Supreme Court ruling that they want to do this in order to keep it up compliance and everything like that. Is everything that's in all of these pages exactly what we need to do in order to get it up to compliance, or is there a lot more than what is actually to get it to compliance?
I mean, I would say a majority of the changes in red are to get it into compliance, but there are other areas in there. When you open it up, there was some discussion that things were added and changed and things were deleted. So there's extra stuff. It's hard to tell exactly what's content and what's not in the regulations.
There's no way to actually see what exactly would be the actual regulations that we would need to comply to and what's just been added in as we think this will be good.
No, I mean, we wouldn't be prepared to give you an exact accounting of that right now, other than a majority of the changes were for content.
Anybody have more questions of staff? Can we have any public comment, I guess, at this point, Mr. Houlis?
I'm Michael A. Houlis, 1504 Riverside Drive. Well, I'm older than all of y'all. And by the way, my brother runs the parking lot, but I'm not a parking attendant. I'm an attorney also. And so this Supreme Court pops up. You realize what you people did tonight? There are 5 senses: smell, taste, feel, hearing, and seeing. Obviously, whatever sign ordinance, it's over the sight of what it looks like. And I don't care how y'all voted on that retaining wall, but you were shown the worst retaining wall in the United States of America by sight. Yet you had a staff that worked around it and approved it. Fine. But how would that be consistent with making sign laws that are more restrictive? If you were so worried about sight, you should have said something about the retaining wall. It's right in the middle of the same sponge exchange. What'll end up happening will be selective enforcement. Which architect or engineer applied for a certain permit? Isn't that what just happened tonight? The same staff that's so worried about signs said you can live with that retaining wall and water drains down, and it's the worst one probably in the United States of America. It would be like putting a sign up there that was crazy looking. And I don't mind it, but be consistent. But then turn around and have some restrictive sign law that says we need to have beautiful aesthetics. We're going to have nothing but selective enforcement and all kinds of applications and forms. That's all I'm pointing out. I'm not going to be here too much longer. Not speaking, but I'm just passing through. One day I was over there. Now I'm over here. Pretty soon I'll be gone. But this is what we're going to have. And that's what it'll be. I just want y'all to see, maybe y'all lost sight of what y'all were doing, okay? But just think about it. Thank you. I would recommend that you completely eliminate changing, maybe the sign law is already too restrictive, if anything, in order to coincide with your retaining wall decision. But a more restrictive one, it's not consistent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Houlis. I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we deny the application 18-38 with the Land Development Code amendment to the sign ordinance at this time.
Do I have a second?
I will second.
Can we have a roll call? And let me clarify, a yes vote is a vote to deny, correct? Okay.
Mr. Chris Curtis?
Yes.
Ms. Vihil?
Yes.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
Yes.
Ms. McCumber?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes. All right, that brings us to item number 7, staff comments.
We have no staff comments, except that staff neglected to put on your agenda that we have to do an organizational meeting. You didn't have a January meeting, so I missed you guys. So we can do that, Erica, and then board comments?
Yes,
Is
that's
that how
fine.
you want to, yeah.
Right, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is first call for nominations for chairman of the board. Anyone like to make a nomination for chair?
You want to be chair? I'll nominate the existing acting chairman.
Is there a second for that nomination?
I'll second.
Any other nominations for chair? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Congratulations, you are now officially the chair at the next meeting. So, no longer acting chair, officially chair.
Official, yeah.
All right, do I have any nominations for vice chair?
Mike? It's up to you. I'll nominate Mike.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any other nominations for vice chair? Hearing none, by default, I guess, but all in favor, say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, we have a new vice chair. If only all elections could go like that.
No kidding. Okay, item number 8, board comments.
I just, first of all, want to thank staff again. You know, again, going through this is very, very difficult. And I know a lot of work was done to do this. You know, I'm sure, you know, the next time this is in front of us, if the business community doesn't chime in and address their concerns, I know, you know, as a business owner, I'm going to relay what I have to say. But again, I appreciate all the work staff has done with regard to this.
Yeah, and I would echo that, and like I said, I don't want to vote against it, but there just wasn't time to adequately address what I see here in front of us in one day. And I think somehow we need to deal with that situation that would put this much information in front of us with only a day to try to digest it. And I really wonder why the commission wouldn't have been noticed of the public hearings that they held on it. I mean, I could have seen it in the newspaper or something, or online somewhere, but I didn't, because it's certainly important enough that anybody on this commission or having a business in the city of Tarpon Springs would want to hear about it and participate in it, I would think. And in some form or fashion, when we have these complicated issues coming in front of us, we need a better opportunity to prepare for them somehow. And if that's all, we're adjourned.